The conference room went dead silent the second I stood up. 50 executives stared at the table. I stared at Adrian Moretti, the mysterious billionaire everyone feared. "This proposal won't work," I said. A few people gasped. One woman actually dropped her pen. Adrian slowly looked up from the documents in front of him. His cold green eyes locked onto mine. "Excuse me?" he asked. My heart was pounding, but I didn't sit down. "You asked for honest feedback. I'm giving it." Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Adrian was the kind of man who could end careers with a single sentence. Then he stood. 6'3". Tailored black suit. Absolute power. "You're an intern," he said. "And you're wrong." I swallowed hard. Or maybe everyone else is too afraid to tell you the truth. The room froze. For 3 long seconds, Adrian just stared at me. Then he smiled. It wasn't friendly. It was dangerous. "You're fired." By noon, security escorted me out of the building. By sunset, I was convinced I'd never hear his name again. I was wrong. 3 days later, a black SUV pulled up beside me outside my tiny apartment. Adrian stepped out himself. "Get in." "No." His jaw tightened. "Nobody says no to me." I crossed my arms. "Maybe that's your problem." For the first time, I saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not anger. Interest. That's when a black sedan came screaming around the corner. Gunshots shattered the evening air. Adrian grabbed me and pulled me behind the SUV as bullets tore through the windows. My ears rang. My body shook. And as he shielded me with his own body, he looked straight at me and said, "Emma, I think you're the reason they're coming after me." Then he turned toward the shooters. And smiled. The fastest way to lose everything is to tell a powerful man the truth when nobody else will. I learned that lesson on a gray Tuesday morning in Manhattan. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 42nd floor while I sat at the very end of a polished conference table that probably cost more than my college tuition. My name is Emma Parker. 24 years old. Marketing intern. Temporary badge. Temporary desk. Temporary future. Everything about my life felt uncertain except one thing. I hated watching people pretend. Especially when millions of dollars were involved. The boardroom smelled like expensive coffee and confidence. Executives in tailored suits flipped through presentation folders while assistants rushed around making sure every detail was perfect. Everyone seemed nervous. Not because of the project. Because of the man at the head of the table. Adrian Moretti. The mysterious CEO who almost never attended meetings in person. People talked about him in whispers. Nobody knew much about him. Only that companies rose or fell based on his decisions. The room became silent the moment he entered. He moved with calm authority, not rushing, not looking around for approval. He didn't need it. The black suit fit him perfectly. Dark hair. Sharp features. Eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing. Even from 30 feet away, his presence changed the atmosphere. I watched senior executives straighten their posture the second he sat down. The presentation began. Slide after slide filled the massive screen. Revenue projections. Expansion strategies. Market forecasts. Everyone nodded along. Everyone agreed. Everyone smiled. And the more they agreed, the more uncomfortable I became. Because the numbers didn't make sense. I'd spent the entire weekend reviewing the proposal. The assumptions were unrealistic. The forecasts ignored several major risks. Nobody mentioned them. Nobody questioned them. They just kept nodding. Adrian remained silent through most of it, occasionally turning a page or asking a short question. The presenter practically glowed whenever Adrian acknowledged him. 40 minutes passed. Then Adrian finally leaned back in his chair. Any concerns? He asked. The question floated across the room. Nobody answered. 20 pairs of eyes dropped toward the table. My heart started pounding. Maybe I should stay quiet. Maybe this wasn't my place. Maybe interns weren't supposed to challenge executives. Then I remembered something my father used to tell me. If everyone is afraid to speak, honesty becomes valuable. Before I could stop myself, I raised my hand. Several heads turned immediately. One executive actually looked horrified. Adrian's gaze settled on me. Calm. Curious. Waiting. I swallowed hard. I have a concern. The silence that followed felt endless. The presenter blinked. A vice president closed his eyes. Somewhere across the room, someone quietly whispered my name like a warning. Adrian didn't look away. Go ahead. My pulse hammered in my ears. Every instinct told me to sit down. Instead, I opened my notebook and said the words that would change everything. I think this entire proposal is built on assumptions that don't reflect reality. The words left my mouth before common sense could stop them. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. The giant screen behind the presenter continued displaying colorful charts and optimistic forecasts while 20 executives stared at me like I had just spoken a language they did not understand. My hands felt cold beneath the conference table. I could practically hear my future career slipping away. The presenter forced a nervous smile. I am sorry, who are you again? A few uncomfortable laughs spread across the room. Emma Parker, I said. Marketing intern. More laughter. Quiet this time. The kind people use when they want to distance themselves from someone else's mistake. I should have felt embarrassed. Instead, I felt annoyed. Intern or not, the numbers still do not work. The room immediately became silent again. Adrian Moretti remained perfectly still at the head of the table. His expression revealed nothing. That somehow made him even more intimidating. The presenter cleared his throat. Our projections were reviewed by senior analysts. I know, I replied. I read the report 3 times. Several heads turned toward me. Nobody expected that answer. Then you should understand the methodology. I opened my notebook. Every eye followed the movement. The expansion forecast assumes a 27% increase in consumer engagement across 6 major markets within 12 months. The last 3 campaigns averaged 11%. The model also ignores rising acquisition costs. The presenter stopped smiling. A vice president shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Across the table, someone slowly lowered their coffee cup. I continued before fear could catch up with me. If those assumptions are wrong, the revenue forecast becomes unrealistic. If the forecast becomes unrealistic, the expansion strategy creates unnecessary risk. Nobody interrupted. Nobody defended the numbers. The silence itself became an answer. Adrian finally spoke. And what would you do differently? His voice was calm. Low. Controlled. My pulse accelerated. This was no longer about surviving the meeting. Now the most powerful person in the room was actually listening. I would slow the rollout, I said. Test smaller markets first. Gather real data before committing to full expansion. The presenter immediately shook his head. That would cost valuable momentum. Losing millions would cost more. A few executives looked away. One of them suddenly seemed fascinated by his notes. Adrian's eyes never left me. It felt like standing under a spotlight. Every weakness. Every uncertainty. Every thought being examined. Finally he stood. The movement alone changed the room. Chairs straightened. Shoulders tightened. Conversations died before they could begin. Adrian walked slowly around the table. Not toward the presenter. Toward me. My heartbeat became impossible to ignore. He stopped beside my chair. Close enough that I could smell expensive coffee and rain from his coat. You seem very confident for an intern. I looked up at him. Every survival instinct told me to back down. To apologize. To agree with everyone else. Instead, I heard myself say, confidence has nothing to do with it. The numbers are either right or wrong. A stunned silence followed. Someone near the door quietly inhaled. Adrian stared at me for several seconds. Long enough for doubt to finally creep into my mind. Then something unexpected happened. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Not quite approval. Something far more dangerous. Interest. Meeting adjourned, he said. The room immediately exploded into movement. Executives gathered papers. Assistants rushed toward exits. Conversations started in nervous whispers. I remained frozen in my chair. Adrian picked up my notebook from the table. Opened it. Scanned a page. Then another. When he looked back at me, his expression had changed completely. Emma Parker, he said quietly. My office. Tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock sharp. Then he walked away. And somehow, that felt far more unsettling than being fired. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adrian Moretti standing beside my chair, flipping through my notebook like he already knew something I did not. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting in a small coffee shop across the street from headquarters, staring at a cup that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier. Outside, Manhattan was waking up. Yellow taxis rolled through wet streets. People hurried beneath umbrellas. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. I was not so sure about myself. At 7:45, I stepped into the lobby. The marble floors reflected the morning light. Security guards nodded politely as I passed. Somehow that felt stranger than being ignored. The elevator carried me to the top floor in complete silence. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked calm. It was a lie. My stomach felt twisted into knots. Adrian's assistant greeted me the moment the elevator doors opened. She was elegant, composed, and looked like she had never been late for anything in her life. Mr. Moretti is expecting you. Those words did not help. She led me down a hallway lined with glass walls and modern artwork. At the end stood a pair of dark wooden doors. She opened them without knocking. Adrian's office was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Sunlight spilled across polished wood and steel. Everything felt precise. Intentional. Powerful. Adrian stood near the windows with a tablet in one hand. He did not immediately look at me. You are 3 minutes early. I did not realize punctuality was a crime. His eyes lifted slowly. There it was again. That dangerous almost smile. Most people try very hard to impress me. Maybe that is their first mistake. Silence followed. I instantly questioned my life choices. Then, unexpectedly, Adrian laughed. Not loudly. Just enough to make me wonder if I had imagined it. He walked toward his desk and placed a thick folder in front of me. Tell me what is wrong with it. I opened it. 50 pages. Financial projections. Marketing strategies. Expansion plans. When do you need my feedback? I asked. In 1 hour. I stared at him. That is impossible. Interesting. He leaned back in his chair. Yesterday you seemed very confident. I felt irritation replacing fear. Confidence does not create extra time. Neither do excuses. For the next 60 minutes I worked non-stop. Page after page. Chart after chart. The challenge felt impossible on purpose. Like a test designed for failure. Yet the deeper I looked, the more problems I found. Assumptions. Risks. Missing data. When the hour ended, I pushed the folder across the desk. Adrian reviewed my notes without speaking. 1 minute passed. Then another. Finally, he closed the folder. You found 7 issues. There were more. His eyes narrowed slightly. You only marked 7. The other 3 were obvious. For the first time, Adrian looked genuinely surprised. Not impressed. Not amused. Surprised. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The change in his expression was immediate. Cold. Sharp. Controlled. He stood without explanation and walked toward the window. A black sedan had just pulled up outside the building below. Adrian stared at it for several seconds before quietly saying, "That is unexpected." And somehow, the way he said those words made me realize this meeting had never really been about business. Something in Adrian's voice made the room feel smaller. I turned toward the window and followed his gaze. The black sedan remained parked across the street, motionless among the morning traffic. To me, it looked ordinary. To Adrian, it clearly was not. He stood there for several seconds, one hand resting lightly against the glass. The city stretched beneath us in every direction. Thousands of people moved through their day completely unaware that anything unusual was happening. Finally, Adrian looked away from the window and returned to his desk. The calm expression was back, but I had seen the brief crack beneath it. "Who is it?" I asked. His eyes met mine immediately. "You ask a lot of questions. That is usually how people learn things." A faint smile appeared and disappeared just as quickly. "Not every question has an answer." That is not really an answer. For a moment I thought he might ignore me. Instead, he sat down and folded his hands together. "Tell me, Emma. Why are you not intimidated?" The question caught me off guard. Should I be? Most people are. I glanced around the enormous office. The expensive furniture. The breathtaking view. The quiet authority that seemed to follow him everywhere. Most people seem more interested in impressing you than understanding you. Silence followed. Adrian studied me carefully. It felt less like a conversation and more like an evaluation. "And what do you think you understand?" he asked. I hesitated. Then decided honesty had gotten me this far. "I think everyone agrees with you because they are afraid of being wrong." His expression remained unreadable. "And you are not afraid?" "Of being wrong?" "All the time." I leaned back slightly. "That is why I check my work." For the first time since entering his office, I heard a genuine laugh. It was brief, but real. Then the phone on his desk rang. The sound immediately changed the atmosphere. Adrian answered without taking his eyes off me. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. When he hung up, the warmth disappeared from his face. Whatever news he had received mattered. "Plans have changed," he said. "For whom?" "For both of us." I frowned. "I am just an intern." "No." His response came faster than expected. "You stopped being just an intern yesterday." My stomach tightened. Those words should have sounded like a compliment. Instead, they felt like a warning. Adrian opened a drawer and removed another folder. This one was thinner. Simpler. He slid it across the desk toward me. "Review this and tell me what you see." I opened it. The first few pages looked normal. Marketing reports. Internal communications. Meeting summaries. Then I noticed something strange. Dates did not match. Numbers conflicted with previous reports. Entire sections appeared designed to hide information rather than explain it. I slowly looked up. Someone altered these records. Adrian nodded once. "Keep going." The deeper I looked, the more inconsistencies appeared. Small details. Easy to miss unless someone was paying attention. By the time I finished, a strange feeling settled in my chest. This was not a test anymore. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Now ask yourself one question. What question? His green eyes locked onto mine. Why would someone inside my company work so hard to hide the truth? The question stayed with me long after I left his office. Why would someone inside the company work so hard to hide the truth? By the time I reached the elevator, I already knew the answer. Money. Power. Fear. Those three things explained most human behavior. The ride down felt strangely quiet. My reflection stared back at me from the polished metal walls. 24 hours ago, I had been an invisible intern. Now I was reviewing confidential reports for one of the most powerful men in New York. None of it made sense. The moment I stepped into the marketing department, conversation stopped. Heads turned. A few people looked away so quickly it was almost funny. Others openly stared. News traveled fast in corporate offices. Apparently faster than elevators. My friend Olivia practically sprinted toward my desk. What happened? She whispered. What do you mean? Do not do that. She pulled a chair beside mine. You disappeared into the executive floor for half the morning. People are saying Adrian Moretti personally requested you. I opened my laptop. People should find a hobby. Olivia lowered her voice even further. Nobody gets invited upstairs twice. That caught my attention. Twice? You had a private meeting yesterday. Then another today. She shook her head. Emma, executives have worked here for years without that happening. Before I could answer, an email appeared on my screen. The sender immediately made my stomach tighten. Adrian Moretti. The subject line contained only 2 words. Conference room. No explanation. No details. Just a time. 4 o'clock. Olivia watched my expression change. That is him, is it not? I closed the message. Maybe. 4 o'clock arrived much faster than I wanted. The conference room was empty when I entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river. Late afternoon sunlight reflected across the glass towers outside. Adrian stood near the far end of the room studying the city below. He did not turn around when I entered. You found the inconsistencies quickly. They were not hidden very well. A quiet chuckle escaped him. That answer explains a lot about you. I crossed my arms. Am I supposed to know what that means? Now he turned. His expression carried something unfamiliar. Not authority. Not calculation. Curiosity. Most people see what they expect to see. You look for what does not fit. I was not sure how to respond. Nobody had ever described me that way before. Adrian stepped closer. I investigated your background. The statement should have shocked me. Strangely, it did not. I assumed you would. Straight A student. Scholarship recipient. 3 part-time jobs. No family connections. His eyes remained fixed on mine. You built everything yourself. Something about hearing my life summarized in a few sentences felt uncomfortable. Was there a point to this investigation? Yes. The answer came instantly. I wanted to know if your honesty could be bought. Silence filled the room. The city glowed beyond the windows as evening settled across Manhattan. Finally, I looked directly at him and said the only answer that felt true. If you have to ask that question, then you still do not know me at all. For the first time since we met, Adrian Moretti looked genuinely caught off guard. For a moment neither of us spoke. The late afternoon sunlight stretched across the conference room, painting long shadows over the polished table between us. Adrian Moretti was not the kind of man who looked surprised often. Yet somehow I had managed it twice in less than a week. His gaze remained fixed on me, thoughtful now rather than calculating. That is an interesting answer, he finally said. It is an honest one. I picked up my bag from the chair. There is a difference. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. You always need the last word, do not you? Only when everyone else is avoiding the truth. The smile disappeared, but something warmer remained behind. Not approval. Respect. The realization unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. Every morning I arrived expecting things to return to normal. Every morning they became more unusual. Reports started appearing on my desk. Invitations to meetings that interns never attended. Requests for feedback from managers who had barely acknowledged my existence a week earlier. Word had spread. People noticed Adrian trusted my opinion. Whether they liked it or not. Friday evening arrived with heavy rain sweeping across Manhattan. Most employees rushed home before the storm worsened. I stayed behind finishing a presentation due the following week. By 7 o'clock the office floor was nearly empty. The constant hum of conversation had faded into silence. Only the sound of rain tapping against the windows remained. I was gathering my things when I noticed a light still glowing beneath a conference room door. Curiosity got the better of me. Through the glass wall, I spotted Adrian sitting alone at the far end of the room. No assistants. No executives. No phone calls. Just him staring at a stack of documents without turning a single page. Something about the scene felt wrong. He looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying weight nobody else could see. Before I could stop myself, I knocked lightly on the glass. His head lifted. For a second he seemed genuinely surprised to see me. Then he gestured toward the empty chair across from him. I stepped inside. "Working late?" he asked. I laughed softly. "You are asking me that?" His eyes moved toward the rain outside. Fair point. Silence settled between us. Strangely, it felt comfortable. Not awkward. Just quiet. After a minute I glanced at the untouched documents. "You have been staring at those for at least 10 minutes. You were watching me?" The light was on. Another small smile appeared. "And?" I leaned back in the chair. "And those papers are clearly not the problem." Adrian looked down at the table. For the first time since I met him, he seemed uncertain whether to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "Do you ever wonder what happens when people stop telling you the truth?" The question caught me off guard. Rain rolled down the windows behind him in silver streams. The city lights blurred beyond the glass. I looked at the man everyone feared and suddenly saw something completely different. Not power. Not influence. Just loneliness. Then Adrian slowly raised his eyes to meet mine and said something I never expected to hear. "I think it happened to me a long time ago." His words lingered in the silence between us. Outside, rain continued sliding down the glass in silver ribbons, blurring the city into a sea of lights. I looked at Adrian and, for the first time, saw something no one else seemed to notice. He was surrounded by people every day. Executives. Advisors. Assistants. Investors. Yet somehow he looked completely alone. "Then maybe you should start asking different people for the truth," I said quietly. Adrian held my gaze for a moment before looking away. A faint smile touched his face. "You make everything sound simple. Most complicated problems start with simple mistakes." He laughed softly. The sound surprised both of us. Before either of us could say anything else, his phone vibrated across the table. The change was immediate. His shoulders straightened. The relaxed expression disappeared. He checked the screen and frowned. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing you need to worry about." That answer irritated me instantly. You know, people usually say that right before something becomes everyone's problem. Adrian looked at me carefully. "You really cannot help yourself, can you?" Probably not. The rain had slowed by the time we left the conference room. Most of the building was empty now. We walked toward the elevators in silence. The polished floors reflected the overhead lights while distant cleaning crews moved through the hallways. Everything felt unusually calm. Almost peaceful. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. We stepped inside. As the doors closed, Adrian's phone rang again. He answered immediately. I tried not to listen, but one sentence caught my attention. How long has this been happening? His voice was calm, but something underneath it felt tense. A pause followed. Then another. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. Do not make any decisions until I arrive. The call ended. The elevator continued descending. Floor after floor passed beneath us. Finally, I looked at him. Company problem? Something like that. That sounds reassuring. His eyes met mine. It was not supposed to involve you. The statement sent a strange chill through me. Before I could ask what he meant, the elevator doors opened into the lobby. The security desk stood directly ahead. Employees crossed the marble floor toward the exits. Everything appeared completely normal. Then I noticed the man standing near the entrance. Dark coat. Baseball cap. Watching. Not the building. Not the lobby. Adrian. The moment our eyes accidentally met, the man turned and walked outside into the night. Fast. Deliberate. Gone before I could process it. Did you know him? I asked. Adrian did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the revolving doors. The calm expression was back, but now I recognized it for what it really was. Control. The kind people use when they refuse to show concern. Emma, he said quietly. From now on, if anything unusual happens, I want you to tell me immediately. My stomach tightened. That sounds less like a suggestion. Adrian looked directly at me. Good. Because it was not one. Then he stepped toward the exit, paused, and added something that made my pulse quicken. I think someone has started paying attention to you. The words followed me all the way home. I think someone has started paying attention to you. Under normal circumstances, I would have dismissed them as paranoia. But nothing about the past week had been normal. By Saturday morning, Manhattan looked bright and harmless beneath clear skies. Families filled the sidewalks. Street vendors lined the corners. Life moved forward as if the world made perfect sense. Mine did not. I tried focusing on ordinary things. Laundry. Groceries. Bills. Anything that could make me feel like Emma Parker again instead of whatever I had become inside Adrian Moretti's world. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Brunch? I smiled immediately. Finally, something normal. We met at a small cafe on the Upper West Side. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air. For an hour, everything felt familiar. Olivia complained about work. I complained about work. We laughed. We avoided talking about Adrian for almost 20 minutes, which might have been a new record. Then she leaned across the table. People are talking. I sighed. About? You already know. I looked out the window. There is nothing to talk about. Olivia raised an eyebrow. The most powerful man in the company personally requests your opinion every day and there is nothing to talk about? Before I could answer, movement outside caught my attention. Across the street, a black SUV sat parked near the corner. Maybe it was nothing. Probably nothing. Yet something felt familiar about it. The vehicle remained there the entire time we were inside. When brunch ended, Olivia hugged me goodbye and headed toward the subway. I started walking home. The SUV remained parked. 3 blocks later, I glanced back. It was still there. My pace slowed. Then quickened. Logic told me I was imagining things. Adrian's warning had simply gotten inside my head. By the time I reached my apartment building, I felt ridiculous. I unlocked the lobby door and stepped inside. Waiting beside the mailboxes was a small package with my name on it. No return address. No company logo. Nothing. I carried it upstairs. My apartment felt unusually quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Traffic hummed below. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Yet my hands hesitated before opening the package. Inside was a single photograph. My breath caught immediately. It was a picture of me. Taken 3 days earlier outside headquarters. I was crossing the street carrying a coffee cup. Completely unaware. On the back, someone had written 4 words in neat black ink. Ask fewer questions, Emma. I stared at the message for several seconds before my phone rang. Adrian's name appeared on the screen. The moment I answered, his voice came through sharp and urgent. Emma, do not leave your apartment. I am on my way. My heart started racing the second the call ended. Adrian had never sounded like that before. Not controlled. Not amused. Not curious. Urgent. I looked down at the photograph again. Ask fewer questions, Emma. The neat handwriting somehow made it worse. Whoever sent it had not wanted to scare me. They wanted me to understand something. They knew where I was. They had been watching. Outside my apartment window, the city continued moving as if nothing had changed. Cars rolled through intersections. People walked dogs. Someone laughed somewhere below. Normal life continued while mine tilted sideways. 10 minutes later, a black SUV stopped outside my building. I recognized it immediately. Adrian stepped out before the vehicle had fully stopped. He crossed the sidewalk quickly and disappeared through the front entrance. A minute later, a knock echoed through my apartment. 3 sharp taps. I opened the door. Adrian entered without wasting a second. His eyes immediately found the photograph in my hand. The moment he saw it, his expression darkened. Not fear. Not anger. Recognition. Where did you get this? He asked. It was delivered downstairs. He took the photograph carefully and studied it. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly and sat down. The silence felt heavier than any explanation. You know who sent it? It was not a question. Adrian nodded once. I know the type of person who would. I folded my arms. That is not the same answer. A faint smile appeared despite the situation. There is the Emma Parker I expected. I shook my head. You still do not get it, do you? His eyes lifted toward mine. Get what? Everybody keeps trying to protect me from information. I stepped closer. You. The executives. Whoever sent this. My voice softened. Nobody trusts me with the truth. The room became completely silent. Adrian stared at me for a long moment. Then something changed. The walls he carried around himself seemed to lower for the first time. You are right, he said quietly. I blinked. That was not the response I expected. Adrian stood and walked toward the window. Evening sunlight painted the skyline gold beyond the glass. Most people want loyalty, he said. Very few want honesty. He looked back at me. You demanded honesty from me the day we met. You demanded it from everyone else too. His expression softened. That is why they noticed you. And that is why I did. For a second neither of us spoke. Then my phone buzzed on the table. An email notification appeared across the screen. Sender unknown. Subject line empty. Adrian saw it at the same moment I did. Slowly, I opened the message. There was only one sentence inside. We know what she found. Beneath it was an attachment. Adrian's jaw tightened. I looked up from the screen. What did I find? For the first time since I met him, Adrian Moretti looked genuinely worried. That, he said quietly, is exactly what we need to find out.